Marcus Chen sat in his father's office on the top floor of the Global Tech Solutions building. The view showed the entire city below them. Tall buildings stretched in every direction. Marcus had grown up seeing this view. His father, David Chen, had built this company from nothing 20 years ago. Now it was worth billions of dollars, but today Marcus was not here to enjoy the view. His father looked worried. David held a folder in his hands. Inside were papers that made him angry and sad at the same time. "Look at these," David said, pushing the folder across his desk. "Anonymous complaints. All from black candidates who applied for jobs here. They all say the same thing. The recruitment team treated them badly, asked strange questions, made them feel unwelcome." Marcus picked up the folder and read through the complaints. One person wrote about how the interviewer seemed surprised by their good education. Another talked about jokes that made them uncomfortable. A third described how the interviewer spent more time questioning if their experience was real, instead of learning about their skills. "This is terrible," Marcus said. His voice was quiet but firm. "How long has this been happening?" "I don't know," David admitted. He ran his hand through his gray hair. "These complaints are anonymous. People are afraid to use their real names. They think nothing will change. Or worse, they think they'll be marked as troublemakers in the industry." Marcus understood why. He was 28 years old. His father was Korean. His mother was African American. Marcus had his father's last name, but he had his mother's skin color and features. Throughout his life, people often saw him as just black. They did not know about his Korean heritage until they heard his last name or met his father. This had taught Marcus a lot about how people treated others based on appearance alone. At expensive private schools, people were sometimes surprised he could afford to be there. At his Ivy League university, some assumed he only got in through special programs, not because of his excellent grades. Even though he grew up wealthy, people made quick judgments about him. "I want to help," Marcus said, looking at his father. "But we need proof." Real proof. Anonymous complaints are important, but they're not enough to make changes. "The recruitment team will just deny everything." David nodded slowly. He had been thinking the same thing. "What do you suggest?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. An idea was forming in his mind. It was risky, but it might work. "Let me go undercover," he said. "Let me apply for a job like a normal candidate. I'll use a different name. I'll create a resume with excellent qualifications. Then we'll see how they really treat black candidates." David looked concerned. "Marcus, if they're really discriminating, this will be painful for you. You'll face racism directly. Are you sure you want to do this?" "I'm sure," Marcus said firmly. "I've faced racism before, Dad. But this time I'll have the power to do something about it. These other candidates faced it and had no way to fight back. I can fight back. We can make real changes." His father studied his son's face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay, but we do this carefully. We document everything legally. We involve our legal team from the start. And Marcus, if it becomes too much, you can stop any time." "I won't stop," Marcus said. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus prepared carefully. He worked with a trusted friend who was a career counselor. Together, they created a new resume under the name Marcus Johnson. They kept his real education from Columbia University and Harvard Business School. They kept his real work experience at top companies. Everything on the resume was true, just under a different last name. The resume was impressive. Marcus had graduated at the top of his class. He had led successful projects at major tech companies. He had skills in management, strategy, and technology. Any company would be lucky to hire someone with his background. Marcus applied online for a senior project manager position at Global Tech Solutions. It was a job he was perfectly qualified for. Within 3 days, he received an email inviting him to an interview. The recruitment team was interested in Marcus Johnson. Now came the hard part. Marcus had to prepare himself mentally. He knew this might be difficult. He talked to his mother about it. She was a psychologist who had faced discrimination throughout her career. She had valuable advice. "Remember, baby, their behavior is not about you," his mother told him. "It's about their own fears and prejudices. You are walking in there as a strong, educated, qualified man. Don't let anyone make you forget that." Marcus also told only a few people about his plan. His father knew, of course. The head of legal knew, because they needed to make sure everything was done properly. And the actual director of human resources knew, a woman named Patricia who was horrified by the complaints and eager to help expose any wrongdoing. What Marcus did not tell was the recruitment team. Jessica Hartman had been the head of recruitment for 5 years. She reported directly to the HR director, but she ran her department independently. Her team included Brad Sullivan and Amy Winters. All three had good reputations in the company, at least on paper. The morning of the interview arrived. Marcus woke up early. He dressed in a nice suit, but not too expensive. He wanted to look professional, but not wealthy. He left his expensive watch at home. He drove his regular Honda instead of his luxury car. Everything about his appearance said qualified candidate, and nothing said son of the founder. Marcus arrived at the Global Tech Solutions building at 9:30 in the morning. His interview was scheduled for 10. He walked through the main entrance like any other visitor. The security guard did not recognize him, which was good. Marcus usually entered through the executive entrance on a different floor. He took the elevator to the 5th floor where the recruitment department had their offices. The waiting area was modern and clean. Large windows let in natural light. Comfortable chairs were arranged around a coffee table with magazines. 3 other candidates were already waiting. 2 were white men in suits. 1 was an Asian woman in professional clothes. They all looked nervous, flipping through their phones or reviewing notes. Marcus sat down and observed. After a few minutes, a recruiter came out and called one of the white men. "John Stevens?" The man jumped up eagerly and followed the recruiter inside. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see them shaking hands warmly. The interviewer was smiling broadly. Marcus waited. He watched as the Asian woman was called next. Her interview also seemed to start well, smiles and handshakes all around. Then it was Marcus's turn. A woman appeared in the doorway. She was in her 40s, blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, wearing a gray suit. "Marcus Johnson?" She called out. Marcus stood up. "That's me," he said with a friendly smile. The woman looked at him for just a second too long. Her smile seemed to freeze on her face. It was a tiny reaction, so small that most people might miss it. But Marcus noticed. He had seen that look before in his life. It was the look of someone whose expectations had just been challenged. "I'm Jessica Hartman, head of recruitment," she said, extending her hand. Her handshake was firm but brief. "Please follow me." Marcus followed her down a hallway. His heart was beating faster now. The test had begun. He was about to find out if the anonymous complaints were true. He was about to see how his father's company really treated black candidates. Jessica led him into a conference room. 2 other people were already sitting at the table. A man in his 30s with reddish hair and a cocky expression stood up. "Brad Sullivan," he said, shaking Marcus's hand quickly. Beside him, a younger woman with brown hair smiled nervously. "Amy Winters," she said softly. "Please have a seat," Jessica said, gesturing to the chair across from them. Marcus sat down. 3 recruiters facing him, all white, all looking at him with expressions he could not quite read. He put his folder with extra copies of his resume on the table in front of him. "So, Marcus," Jessica began, opening his resume on her tablet, "tell us about yourself." And with those simple words, the real test began. Marcus took a breath and began speaking. "Well, I graduated from Columbia University with honors in computer science. Then I got my MBA from Harvard Business School. I've worked at several tech companies over the past 5 years, leading major projects and teams." Jessica nodded slowly, but her expression was strange. She looked down at his resume, then back up at him. "This is quite impressive," she said. Then she paused. "For someone from your background," the words hung in the air. Marcus felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his face neutral. "Thank you," he said simply. "I worked very hard for my education and career." Brad leaned back in his chair. "Columbia and Harvard, huh?" he said. His tone was casual, but something felt off about it. "That must have been quite an adjustment. Where did you grow up?" "I grew up in Connecticut," Marcus answered. It was true. His family had lived in a wealthy suburb outside Hartford. "Connecticut," Brad repeated. He exchanged a quick glance with Jessica. "But where are you really from?" "Originally, I mean." Marcus knew exactly what Brad was asking. He had heard this question many times in his life. People wanted to know his ethnic background, his family history, anything to explain why a black man had achieved so much. "My family has lived in Connecticut for years," Marcus said calmly. "I was born there." Right, Brad said, but he did not look satisfied with the answer. Amy spoke up for the first time. Her voice was softer than the others. Your resume shows you led a team of 15 people at your last job. That's impressive. How did you handle the responsibility? It seemed like a normal question at first, but then Jessica cut in. Yes, tell us about that. Were there any challenges? Sometimes people in leadership positions face questions about their authority. Did your team respect you? Marcus understood what she was really asking. She wanted to know if his team had problems with a black manager. My team and I had excellent working relationships, Marcus said firmly. We completed 3 major projects ahead of schedule and under budget. I have references who can confirm this. Oh, we're not doubting you, Jessica said quickly, but her tone suggested otherwise. We just like to understand the full picture. Leadership can be complicated, Brad jumped in again. Let's talk about your education. Columbia and Harvard are great schools. They have very competitive admissions. He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. Did you receive any special scholarships or programs that helped you get in? Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, but he pushed it down. He knew what Brad was really asking. He wanted to know if Marcus had gotten into these schools through affirmative action rather than merit. I received academic scholarships based on my grades and test scores, Marcus said. I was in the top 5% of my high school class. Impressive, Jessica said, but she did not sound impressed. She sounded skeptical. And your high school was in Connecticut? Yes, a private school in Hartford, Marcus answered. Private school, Brad said, raising his eyebrows. Those are expensive. Your family must be well off. Marcus hesitated. This was getting into territory that felt very personal, but he had to stay in character as a regular job candidate. My parents valued education and made sacrifices for it, he said. It was vague, but not a lie. Jessica wrote something on her tablet. Let's move on to talk about cultural fit, she said. Here at Global Tech Solutions, we have a certain image we maintain. Professional, polished, representing the company well. How would you describe your personal style? Professional and results-focused, Marcus said. I believe in doing excellent work and building strong relationships with colleagues and clients. Of course, Jessica said. But I mean more your personal presentation. How you present yourself to the world. Would you say you fit well into corporate culture? Marcus wanted to ask what she meant by that, but he knew. She was questioning whether he would look right representing the company. Whether clients would feel comfortable with him. Whether he matched their image of what a senior manager should be. I've succeeded in corporate environments throughout my career, Marcus said. My work speaks for itself. Brad was looking at something on his laptop. I see here you volunteered with several community organizations. Tell us about that. Marcus listed the volunteer work on his resume. He had mentored young students, helped with job training programs, and supported education initiatives. I believe in giving back to the community, Marcus said. I mentor high school and college students interested in tech careers. That's nice, Brad said. What kind of communities do you focus on? Again, Marcus knew what he was really asking. I work with students from all backgrounds who need guidance and support, Marcus answered. Right, but specifically? Brad pressed. I mean, do you focus on certain neighborhoods or groups? Underserved communities, Marcus said finally. Students who might not have access to the same opportunities I had. Jessica and Brad exchanged another look. Amy was writing notes, her eyes down on her paper. Marcus could not tell what she was thinking. Let's talk about your technical skills, Jessica said, shifting topics. She asked him several questions about software, project management tools, and technical processes. These were normal interview questions. Marcus answered them all confidently and thoroughly. He knew his stuff, but then Jessica circled back. You clearly know the technical side, she said. But let me ask you something. Have you ever faced any legal issues? Anything in your background we should know about? Marcus stared at her. No, he said firmly. I have a completely clean record. Great, great, Brad said with a laugh that sounded forced. We have to ask everyone that. Standard question. Can't be too careful these days, you know. But Marcus had been watching the other candidates through the glass walls earlier. He had not heard them ask John Stevens or the Asian woman about criminal records. They had asked him this question specifically. The implication was clear and insulting. Amy asked another question about his project management experience. It was a reasonable question, and Marcus appreciated her focusing on actual job qualifications. But she still did not challenge anything her colleagues were saying. Jessica looked at the clock. We're running a bit long, she said. Just a few more questions. Tell me, Marcus, how do you handle stress and conflict in the workplace? I believe in direct, respectful communication, Marcus said. When conflicts arise, I address them professionally and look for solutions that work for everyone. And if someone questioned your authority or decisions? Brad asked. How would you handle that? The same way, Marcus said. With professionalism and clear communication. Good leaders are open to feedback and different perspectives. Even if that feedback was unfair? Jessica pressed. Even if people made assumptions about you based on things other than your work? Marcus felt like the conversation had just become very pointed. Was she testing how he would react to racism? Or was she admitting it might happen? I focus on demonstrating my capabilities through results, Marcus said carefully. People who are fair-minded judge others by their work, not by assumptions. Jessica nodded slowly. That's a diplomatic answer, she said. She looked at Brad and Amy. Any other questions? Brad shook his head. Amy said quietly, I think we covered everything. Well, Marcus, Jessica said, standing up. Thank you for coming in today. We have several other candidates to interview. We'll be reviewing everyone and making our decision within the next week. We'll be in touch. She extended her hand again. The handshake was just as brief as before. Brad and Amy also shook his hand quickly. Everyone was smiling, but the smiles felt fake and cold. Marcus gathered his folder and stood up. Thank you for your time, he said politely. I look forward to hearing from you. Jessica walked him to the door of the conference room. We'll send you an email, she said. Then she closed the door behind him. Marcus walked down the hallway back toward the waiting area. His mind was racing. The interview had been worse than he expected. The microaggressions were constant. The questions were inappropriate. The skepticism about his qualifications was obvious. They had treated him completely differently than he saw them treat the white candidates. But he needed more evidence. He needed to hear what they said when they thought no one was listening. When Marcus reached the waiting area, he did not leave the building. Instead, he sat down in one of the chairs. He pulled out his phone and pretended to check messages. A young woman at the reception desk looked at him. Can I help you with something? She asked. I'm just waiting for some paperwork, Marcus said with a smile. They said someone would bring me some forms to fill out. It was a lie, but she nodded and went back to her computer. Marcus positioned himself where he could see down the hallway. The conference room where he had interviewed was just around the corner. The door was closed, but he knew the recruiters were still in there. He reached into his pocket and turned on the voice recording app on his phone. The phone was legal in this state for recording conversations where you had a reasonable expectation that you might be talked about. His lawyer had confirmed this. Marcus placed the phone on the chair beside him, the microphone pointing toward the hallway. Then he waited. His heart was pounding. His hands felt sweaty. He was angry and hurt and determined all at the same time. He wanted to leave and never come back, but he also wanted the truth. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Marcus pretended to read something on a tablet he had brought. He looked like any candidate waiting for paperwork or killing time before heading home. Then he heard voices coming from the conference room. The door was opening. Marcus tensed but kept his eyes on his tablet. He saw Jessica, Brad, and Amy walking into the hallway. They were talking and laughing about something. They did not look in his direction. They walked into a small break room across from the conference room. The door was left partially open. Marcus could hear their voices clearly now. They thought they were alone. They thought no one was listening. What Marcus heard next would change everything. Marcus sat very still in the waiting area. His phone was recording every word coming from the break room down the hall. The receptionist was busy with her computer and paid no attention to him. To anyone watching, he looked like a patient candidate waiting for paperwork, but inside his heart was racing. He could hear the 3 recruiters clearly. They were talking about his interview. Well, that was a waste of time, Jessica's voice said. She sounded tired and annoyed. I don't know why HR keeps pushing these diversity candidates on us. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. His hands gripped his tablet harder. Brad laughed. It was not a kind laugh. Marcus Johnson, he said, putting emphasis on the name in a mocking way. Did you see that suit? Probably bought it just for this interview. And that story about Columbia and Harvard? Please. Oh, come on, Amy's voice said. But she was laughing too. The resume looked legitimate. Sure it did, Jessica said. Marcus could hear the sound of a coffee machine running. They all do. But we know how these things work. Affirmative action gets them in the door. Great inflation helps them graduate. Then they show up here expecting us to hand them senior positions. Marcus closed his eyes. He wanted to storm down that hallway and confront them right now, but he forced himself to stay still. He needed to hear everything. I almost laughed when he said he led a team of 15 people, Brad said. Can you imagine? His team probably couldn't stand him. Nobody respects that kind of authority. Did you notice how defensive he got? Jessica asked. When I asked about his background and cultural fit, he got so tense. That tells me he can't handle professional environments. He's not ready for senior management. Exactly, Brad agreed. We need someone who can represent this company. Someone clients will feel comfortable with. Someone who looks the part. Marcus Johnson is not that person. Amy spoke again, her voice quieter, but his technical answers were really good. He clearly knows project management. That's not the point, Amy, Jessica said sharply. Technical skills are just one part of the job. We need to think about the bigger picture. Would you want him representing us in meetings with our biggest clients? Would those clients take him seriously? There was a pause. Then Amy said softly, I guess not. Marcus felt sick. These were the people who controlled who got hired at his father's company. These were the people who decided which candidates deserved opportunities. And they were judging people not on skills or experience, but on skin color. Brad spoke again.
Hey, remember that other guy a few months ago?
What was his name? Jamal something? Oh God, yes, Jessica said with a groan. Perfect resume again. MIT graduate. Great experience. But same problem. Not the right fit for our culture. We dodged a bullet on that one, Brad said. Can you imagine the problems if we had hired him?
This is exactly why I hate when David Chen pushes these diversity initiatives, Jessica continued.
He doesn't understand what happens on the ground level. He doesn't see how it affects team dynamics and company culture. He just wants to check boxes and look good in the press. Marcus's hands were shaking now. They were talking about his father. The man who built this company. The man who believed in giving everyone fair chances. Well, we're the gatekeepers, Brad said proudly. It's our job to protect the company's standards. We know what works and what doesn't. Let David Chen have his diversity speeches and programs. We'll make sure the actual hiring stays on track. Exactly, Jessica agreed. That's why we're good at our jobs. We know how to filter out the candidates who look good on paper, but won't actually succeed here. So what do we do with Marcus Johnson? Amy asked. Same thing we always do, Jessica said. Marcus could hear the smile in her voice. We send him a nice rejection email in a few days. Thank you for your interest. Very competitive pool. We've decided to move forward with other candidates who are a better fit. Standard stuff? Think he'll complain? Brad asked. They never do, Jessica said. They suspect what happened, but they can't prove anything. We were professional in the interview. We asked job-related questions. There's nothing he can point to as obviously wrong. It's just a feeling he'll have. And feelings don't hold up in court. The three of them laughed together. The sound made Marcus feel cold inside. Who are we giving the job to? Amy asked. I like that Stephen Peterson guy from this morning, Brad said. Did you see his interview? Oh yes, Jessica said. Now that's what I'm talking about. Great background, confident, professional appearance. He'll fit right in with the team. Clients will love him. His resume wasn't as strong as Marcus Johnson's, Amy pointed out hesitantly. So what? Brad said. Resume isn't everything. Stephen has the right attitude. He went to a good school, has solid experience, and most importantly, he'll represent us well. That's worth more than some inflated credentials. Marcus remembered seeing Stephen Peterson in the waiting area. He was one of the white men in suits. Marcus had overheard the receptionist mention his name when she called him. Stephen looked like he was maybe 25 years old. Fresh out of graduate school, probably. Less experienced than Marcus. But he had something Marcus apparently did not have in their eyes. White skin. All right, I need to get back to work, Jessica said. We have 2 more interviews this afternoon. Let's hope they're better than this morning. Anyone interesting? Brad asked. Another diversity candidate at 3, Jessica said with a sigh.
And then a promising guy at 4.
I already looked at his resume. He's perfect. What's the diversity candidate's background? Amy asked. Black woman, Jessica said. Engineering degree from Georgia Tech, 5 years of experience. Looks qualified on paper, but you know how this goes. Same routine then. Brad said. Professional interview. Ask the standard questions, then politely reject. Exactly, Jessica confirmed. Marcus heard chairs moving. They were getting ready to leave the break room. He quickly looked down at his tablet, pretending to be absorbed in reading. His phone was still recording. The three recruiters walked past the waiting area. They did not look at Marcus. They did not know he was still there. They disappeared around a corner toward their offices. Marcus waited another minute. Then he stopped the recording on his phone. His hands were trembling. He stood up and walked quickly toward the elevators. The receptionist called out, "Did you find what you needed?" "Yes, thank you," Marcus said automatically. He just wanted to get out of there. He rode the elevator down to the lobby. He walked out of the building into the bright afternoon sunlight. He kept walking until he was a block away. Then he stopped and leaned against a wall. Marcus felt overwhelmed by emotions. Anger was the strongest one. These people had insulted him, mocked him, and dismissed his achievements without any shame. They had revealed themselves as exactly what the anonymous complaint said they were. Racists who were actively blocking qualified black candidates from getting hired, but Marcus also felt hurt. Even though he knew intellectually that racism existed, hearing it so openly was painful. Hearing them laugh about rejecting him because of his skin color, hearing them dismiss his hard work and education as fake or inflated, it stung deeply. And then there was sadness. Sadness for all the other Marcus Johnsons out there, all the qualified black candidates who went through interviews like this and never knew why they got rejected, who questioned themselves and their abilities, who had no power to fight back. Marcus pulled out his phone and called his father's private line. David Chen answered on the first ring. "How did it go?" "Dad," Marcus said, his voice tight with emotion. "I got it all, everything. They said things that were even worse than I expected." "Come up to my office," David said immediately. "We'll listen to the recording together." Marcus walked back into the building. This time he used his executive key card to access the private elevator. He rode up to the top floor. His father was waiting in his office with Patricia, the HR director, and Robert Kim, the company's head lawyer. "Marcus," Patricia said, standing up. She looked concerned. "Are you okay?" "I will be," Marcus said. He sat down heavily in a chair. "But you all need to hear this recording." He played it for them from the beginning. The room was silent as the voices of Jessica, Brad, and Amy filled the air. Everyone listened to the mocking tone, the racist assumptions, the casual dismissal of qualified candidates, and the deliberate plan to reject people based on race. When the recording ended, David Chen's face was dark with anger. Patricia looked shocked and upset. Robert was already taking notes on his legal pad. "This is worse than we thought," Patricia said quietly. "This isn't just unconscious bias. This is deliberate discrimination. They have a system for filtering out black candidates." "They mentioned someone named Jamal," Robert said. "We need to pull all hiring records going back at least 2 years. I want to see every black candidate who was rejected and compare their qualifications to who got hired instead." "Do it," David said firmly. "I want a complete investigation. I want to know exactly how many qualified people were rejected because of this." Marcus looked at his father. "They talked about you, Dad. They said you push diversity initiatives, but they're the gatekeepers. They basically admitted they ignore your directives." David's expression grew even more serious. "Then they've been undermining this company's values for years. They've been lying to me about their hiring practices, and they've been destroying people's careers because of racism." "What happens now?" Marcus asked. Robert spoke up. "First, we secure this evidence properly. The recording is legal since you were in a public space and they were discussing you. We'll get a certified copy made. Then we investigate thoroughly. We need documentation of the pattern. After that, we take action." "I want them fired," David said flatly. "All 3 of them today." "David, I understand your anger," Robert said carefully. "But we need to do this right. If we fire them today without a proper investigation, they could claim wrongful termination. Let's build an airtight case. It will take a few days, but then we can terminate them for cause with full documentation. They won't be able to fight it." David took a deep breath. "How long?" "Give me 1 week," Robert said. "I'll pull all the records. I'll interview other candidates if needed. I'll document everything. Then we'll call them in and terminate them with full legal backing." Patricia nodded. "In the meantime, I'll make sure they don't conduct any more interviews. I'll tell them we're revising the interview process and putting hiring on hold temporarily. They won't suspect anything." Marcus felt some of his anger transforming into determination. And after we fire them, what then? How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? We rebuild the entire recruitment system, Patricia said firmly. New processes, new training, new oversight. This can never happen again. David looked at his son. Marcus, I'm sorry you had to experience that. I'm sorry this was happening in my company without me knowing. I'm glad I could expose it, Marcus said. But Dad, how many other companies have people like this? How many qualified people are being rejected everywhere because of racism like this? It was a question no one in the room could answer. But they all knew the answer was too many. We start by fixing our company, David said. Then we make noise about it. We become an example. We show other companies that this is unacceptable and that there are consequences. Marcus nodded. The anger was still there. So was the hurt. But now there was also hope. Hope that real change was possible. Hope that his painful experience could lead to justice, not just for him, but for everyone who had been rejected by Jessica Hartman and her team. Over the next 5 days, Robert Kim and his legal team worked around the clock. They pulled hiring records from the recruitment department going back 3 years. What they found shocked everyone involved in the investigation. Marcus sat in a conference room with his father, Patricia, Robert, and 2 other lawyers. Papers covered the table. Laptops showed spreadsheets full of data. The evidence was overwhelming. Look at these numbers, Robert said, pointing to a chart on his screen. Over the past 3 years, Jessica Hartman's team interviewed 231 black candidates for various positions. They hired 30 of them. That's a 13% hiring rate. What's the rate for white candidates? David asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer would be bad. White candidates had a 68% hiring rate, Robert said. Asian candidates were at 55%. Hispanic candidates were at 42%. Black candidates were by far the lowest. Patricia shook her head in disbelief. How did I not see this pattern? Because Jessica was careful, Robert explained. She always had plausible reasons for each individual rejection. Candidate wasn't a culture fit. Skills weren't quite right for the role. Other candidates were stronger. Individually, each rejection could be explained away. But when you look at the pattern over time, the discrimination is undeniable. Marcus looked through some of the files. He saw resumes of black candidates with degrees from top universities. Years of relevant experience, glowing references. Rejected. Meanwhile, white candidates with weaker credentials were hired for the same positions. One file caught his attention. A man named Jamal Harris, MIT graduate with a computer science degree, 6 years of experience at major tech companies, applied for a senior developer position 18 months ago, rejected after the interview with Jessica's team. The note said he was not a strong culture fit and seemed defensive during questions. This is the Jamal they mentioned in the recording, Marcus said, holding up the file. They laughed about rejecting him. We found 37 similar cases, Robert said. Black candidates who were clearly qualified, often more qualified than the people who got hired, but were rejected for vague reasons about culture fit or personality. David stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the city below. His company employed thousands of people in this building and others around the world. The thought that this discrimination had been happening under his leadership made him feel sick. What about the people who were hired instead? He asked without turning around. One of the lawyers, a woman named Sandra, pulled up another spreadsheet. We looked at that too. In 23 cases, we found white candidates who were hired within 2 weeks of a qualified black candidate being rejected. In those 23 cases, the white candidate had less education, less experience, or both compared to the black candidate. Give me an example, David said. Sandra clicked through some files. Here's one. Position was for marketing manager. Black candidate named Keisha Williams applied. Bachelor's degree from University of Michigan. 8 years of marketing experience. Led successful campaigns for Fortune 500 companies. Rejected after interview. Notes say she lacked the professional polish they were looking for. And who got hired? Marcus asked. Tyler Anderson. Bachelor's degree from a state school. 4 years of experience, mostly at smaller companies. But according to Jessica's notes, he had excellent interpersonal skills and would represent the company well. Sandra paused. Tyler is white. The room was quiet for a moment. The pattern was clear and ugly. Have we reached out to any of these rejected candidates? Patricia asked. Not yet, Robert said. We wanted to complete the full investigation first. But I think we should. Some of them might want to file formal complaints or even lawsuits. They deserve to know what happened to them. They do, David agreed. Make a list. We'll contact every qualified black candidate who was rejected over the past 3 years. We'll offer them the opportunity to reapply, and we'll guarantee fair interviews with a new recruitment team. Marcus felt a small sense of hope at that. At least some good could come from this situation. People who deserved opportunities might finally get them. There's more, Robert said. He pulled up an email on his screen. We found internal communications between Jessica and Brad. Look at this one from 14 months ago. He read aloud. From Jessica to Brad. Subject line, today's interviews. Message says another batch of diversity candidates today. Why does HR keep sending these people our way? We both know they won't work out. Maybe if we reject enough of them, HR will stop wasting our time. Brad's response? David asked, his voice tight. He says, agreed. We're doing the company a favor. Standards matter. Robert looked up from the screen. There are dozens of emails like this. They saw themselves as protecting the company from what they viewed as unqualified diversity hires. Marcus felt his anger rising again. They weren't protecting anything. They were destroying opportunities and breaking the law. Actually, you're right about the law, Robert said. This is clear violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. It's illegal employment discrimination based on race. If any of these candidates wanted to file complaints with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, they would have strong cases. How did they get away with this for so long? Patricia wondered aloud. Several reasons, Sandra explained. First, job candidates usually don't know why they're really rejected. They might suspect discrimination, but they can't prove it. Second, the recruitment team had autonomy. Jessica reported to you, Patricia, but she ran her department independently. You trusted her. Third, they were careful not to say anything obviously discriminatory in written feedback.
The emails between them were on company servers. But who reads through internal recruitment emails looking for problems?
And finally, Robert added, many people who face discrimination don't report it. They're afraid of being labeled troublemakers in their industry. They're afraid no one will believe them. They just move on and try the next opportunity. David turned back from the window. Well, they got away with it for years, but not anymore. Robert, is the case strong enough? Absolutely, Robert said without hesitation. Between Marcus's recording, the hiring data showing clear discrimination patterns, and the internal emails, we have multiple forms of evidence. If they tried to sue for wrongful termination, they would lose badly. We have grounds for immediate termination with cause. Then we do it tomorrow, David said firmly. I want all 3 of them called into a meeting. I want you there, Robert and Patricia and Marcus. Me? Marcus asked, surprised. Yes, you, David said. You were brave enough to expose this. You deserve to be there when they face consequences. Also, I'm officially making you vice president of company culture. We need someone in leadership who understands these issues personally and who will make sure this never happens again. Marcus felt a mix of emotions. Pride that his father trusted him with this role, nervousness about the confrontation tomorrow, and determination to make real changes. What happens to them after termination? Patricia asked. Do we make this public? David considered this. We fire them quietly with a legal agreement that prevents them from discussing the case. In return, we won't actively publicize what they did. But if they try to sue or make trouble, we release everything. The choice is theirs. That seems fair, Robert said. More than fair, considering what they did. What about the black woman they were planning to interview today? Marcus suddenly remembered. They said she had an interview at 3 o'clock. Did that happen? Patricia checked her computer. Yes, Kendra Washington. Engineering background. The interview was conducted this afternoon by Jessica's team. I want to see the feedback notes, David said. Patricia pulled up the file. Her face fell as she read. They rejected her. Notes say she lacked the communication skills needed for client-facing work. They recommended not moving forward. Marcus stood up. Dad, we need to call her. Right now. Before she gets that rejection email. We need to tell her what happened and offer her a real interview with fair people. David nodded. Patricia, make that call. Tell her there were problems with her interview process and we want to bring her back to meet with a different team. Don't explain everything yet, but make sure she knows we value her candidacy. I'll call her within the hour, Patricia promised. Robert closed his laptop. I think we have everything we need. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. We call them in and terminate them. I'll prepare the severance agreements and legal documents tonight. One more thing, Marcus said. Everyone looked at him. Before we fire them, I want them to know who I really am. I want them to see my face when they realize what they did. David looked at his son with pride. You'll get that moment, he said. Tomorrow they learn the truth. That evening, Marcus went home to his apartment. He could not stop thinking about the next day. He called his mother and told her everything that had happened. She listened quietly, then said something that stuck with him. Baby, what you're doing is important. But remember, this isn't really about revenge. It's about justice. Those 3 people will lose their jobs, and they deserve to. But the real victory is making sure this doesn't happen to the next person. The real victory is changing the system. Marcus knew she was right. Firing Jessica, Brad, and Amy would feel satisfying. But it was just the first step. The real work would be building something better. He barely slept that night. He kept thinking about all the people who had been hurt by that recruitment team. Jamal Harris with his MIT degree, Keisha Williams with her marketing experience, Kendra Washington who just had her interview that afternoon, dozens of others whose names were in those files. People who questioned their own abilities because they kept getting rejected. People who never knew the real reason was just the color of their skin. Marcus thought about his own privilege. Yes, he faced racism, but he had resources and power that others did not. He had a father who owned the company. He could fight back in ways that most people could not. That privilege came with responsibility. He had to use it to help others who lacked that power. When morning came, Marcus dressed carefully. He wore one of his best suits. He wanted to look every bit the executive he was. He wanted Jessica, Brad, and Amy to see him and realize their terrible mistake. He arrived at Global Tech Solutions at 9:30. He went straight to his father's office. Patricia and Robert were already there reviewing final documents. Ready? David asked his son. Marcus took a deep breath. Ready, he said. At exactly 10 a.m., Jessica Hartman, Brad Sullivan, and Amy Winters arrived at the executive conference room. They had been told there was an important meeting about recruitment processes. They had no idea what was really about to happen. They walked into the room smiling, confident, completely unaware that their world was about to change. When they saw David Chen, they looked pleased. The CEO rarely met with recruitment staff directly. When they saw Patricia, their HR director, they seemed slightly nervous but still calm. But when they saw Marcus sitting at the table in an expensive suit, looking very much at home in the executive setting, their expressions changed. Confusion flickered across their faces. They recognized him but could not immediately place him. Please sit down, David said. His voice was cold and formal. We have a lot to discuss. The 3 recruiters sat down slowly. They were starting to realize this was not a normal meeting. Jessica's eyes kept moving between Marcus and David like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Robert Kim placed a small recording device on the table. Before we begin, he said, I want to inform you that this meeting is being recorded for legal purposes. You have the right to have your own legal counsel present, but you are not required to. Now they looked scared. Brad's face went pale. Amy gripped the arms of her chair. What's this about? Jessica asked, trying to sound confident but failing. David Chen leaned forward. It's about discrimination. It's about illegal hiring practices. It's about everything you've been doing for the past 3 years. And then he pressed play on Marcus's recording. The voices filled the conference room. Jessica's voice saying that was a waste of time and complaining about diversity candidates. Brad's mocking tone as he dismissed Marcus's credentials. Amy's nervous laughter as she went along with everything. Marcus watched their faces as they listened. He saw the exact moment when each of them realized what they were hearing. Jessica's eyes went wide. Brad's mouth fell open. Amy started to cry. The recording played for 5 full minutes. Every racist comment, every discriminatory statement, every casual dismissal of qualified candidates based on skin color. When it finally ended, the silence in the room was heavy and terrible. Jessica was the first to speak. Where did you get that? Her voice shook. That's a private conversation. You can't record people without permission, Robert Kim answered calmly. Actually, we can. The recording was made in a public area of the building. You were discussing a candidate who was still in that public area. The law is very clear. This recording is completely legal. This is taken out of context, Brad said desperately. We were just venting. Everyone complains about their job. It doesn't mean anything. Really? David said. His voice was ice cold. Then let me show you what it means. Patricia opened a laptop and turned it so the 3 recruiters could see the screen. These are your hiring statistics for the past 3 years. 13% of black candidates hired. 68% of white candidates hired. Care to explain that context? Jessica's face went from pale to red. That's just coincidence. Different candidates have different qualifications. Is it coincidence? Robert pulled out a thick folder. Because we pulled the files. We compared the rejected black candidates to the white candidates you hired instead. In case after case, the black candidates were more qualified. Better education. More experience. Stronger references. But they got rejected for vague reasons about culture fit. He opened the folder and pulled out specific examples. Jamal Harris, MIT graduate, 6 years of experience. Rejected. You hired someone with 4 years of experience from a state school instead. Keisha Williams, 8 years of marketing experience. Rejected. You hired someone with 4 years of experience instead. Amy was crying harder now. I didn't want to do it, she said between sobs. Jessica and Brad made the decisions. I just went along. You just went along, Marcus said. He spoke for the first time since the meeting started. All 3 recruiters turned to look at him. You laughed at their racist jokes. You participated in their discriminatory interviews. You helped ruin people's careers. Going along makes you just as guilty. Who are you? Jessica asked. She was staring at Marcus like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. Marcus stood up. I'm Marcus Chen, Vice President of Company Culture, and son of David Chen, the founder of this company. He paused. I'm also the candidate you interviewed 5 days ago under the name Marcus Johnson. The shock on their faces would have been funny if the situation was not so serious. Jessica's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Brad looked like he might be sick. Amy buried her face in her hands. You set us up, Brad finally said. This was a trap. No, Marcus said firmly. You set yourselves up. You chose to discriminate. You chose to make racist comments. You chose to violate the law and this company's values. I just gave you the opportunity to show who you really are. We didn't know, Jessica said weakly. We didn't know you were the CEO's son. Exactly, David said. You didn't know. So you treated him the way you treat every black candidate who comes through your door. With skepticism, with disrespect, and with prejudice. The only difference is that this time, there are consequences. Patricia spoke up. I've reviewed your employment records. Jessica, you attended 3 diversity training sessions in the past 2 years. Brad, you attended 2. Amy, you attended 4. Each time you signed documents saying you understood the company's anti-discrimination policies. You knew this was wrong. You did it anyway. We never meant to hurt anyone, Amy said through her tears. We just thought we were maintaining standards. Maintaining standards, Marcus repeated. Is that what you call it? Tell me, Amy, what standard does rejecting an MIT graduate meet? What standard does mocking someone's education meet? What standard does judging people by their skin color instead of their qualifications meet? Amy had no answer. None of them did. Robert placed 3 documents on the table. These are termination agreements. Effective immediately, you are no longer employed by Global Tech Solutions. You're being terminated for cause due to discriminatory practices and violation of federal employment law. You can't do this, Brad said, his voice rising. We'll sue, we'll go to the press, we'll fight this. You can try, Robert said calmly, but I strongly advise against it. If you sign these agreements, you'll receive 3 months of severance pay. You'll keep your health insurance for 6 months, and we will not make the details of your termination public. If you refuse to sign, or if you try to sue, we will release everything. The recording, the hiring data, the internal emails, all of it. Every future employer will know exactly why you were fired. Jessica looked at the document in front of her. Her hands were shaking. This is career ending. No one will hire us. You're right, David said. This probably will affect your careers. But think about all the careers you ended. Think about Jamal Harris, who probably wondered if he was good enough after you rejected him. Think about Keisha Williams, who might have questioned her abilities. Think about every black candidate who walked out of your interviews feeling small and unworthy. You ended their opportunities without a second thought. Now you'll get a tiny taste of what that feels like. I'm sorry, Amy said suddenly. She was looking at Marcus. I'm so sorry. You're right. I went along when I should have spoken up. I knew it was wrong. I was just afraid of losing my job, but that's no excuse. I hurt people. I'm sorry. Marcus looked at her. He could see that her regret was real, but it was too late. Thank you for apologizing, he said, but an apology doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't give back the opportunities you took from people. It's a start, but it's not enough. Jessica and Brad did not apologize. They sat in angry silence, glaring at the documents in front of them. You have two options, Robert said. Sign the agreements now, or we'll escort you out with nothing and make everything public. You have 5 minutes to decide. The room was quiet except for Amy's quiet crying. Finally, Jessica picked up a pen. She signed the document with sharp, angry movements. Brad followed, slamming the pen down on the table when he finished. Amy signed last, her signature shaky. Thank you, Robert said, collecting the documents. Security will escort you to your offices. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal belongings. Your company email and building access have already been terminated. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Jessica, Brad, and Amy stood up slowly. They looked broken and defeated. As they walked toward the door, Jessica stopped and turned back. I want you to know, she said, looking at David and Marcus, that we believed we were doing the right thing for the company. We weren't trying to be racist, we just wanted the best people. The best people, Marcus said quietly. You mean the whitest people. That's what you really wanted, and you convinced yourselves it was about standards and culture fit. But it was always about race. You just didn't want to admit it to yourselves. Jessica had nothing to say to that. She turned and followed the security guards out of the room. Brad went next, still looking angry. Amy was last. She glanced back at Marcus one more time with red, swollen eyes. Then she was gone. When the door closed, everyone in the room let out a breath. David stood up and walked to Marcus. He put his hand on his son's shoulder. Are you okay? Marcus nodded. I think so. That was harder than I expected, facing them, seeing their reactions, but it needed to happen. It did, Patricia agreed. Marcus, what you did took real courage. You exposed a serious problem and now we can fix it. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now we rebuild, David said. Patricia, I want you to personally oversee recruitment until we hire a new team. I want diverse hiring panels for every position. I want structured interviews with the same questions asked to every candidate. I want regular audits of hiring data to catch any patterns. I'll implement all of that, Patricia promised. And, Marcus, I'd like you to be involved in designing the new system. Your perspective is invaluable. Over the next hour, they discussed the plans in detail. They would reach out to every qualified black candidate rejected over the past 3 years. They would offer genuine apologies and opportunities for re-interviews. They would make public statements about their commitment to diversity, backed up by real action and accountability. What about the 3 of them? Marcus asked. Jessica, Brad, and Amy. What do you think will happen to them? Robert shrugged. Amy might find work again eventually, especially if she's genuinely learned from this. She's young and she showed real remorse. Jessica and Brad, they'll struggle. Word spreads in the industry. And if they try to claim wrongful termination, we'll make everything public and their names will be attached to this forever. Marcus felt conflicted. Part of him wanted them to suffer consequences. They had earned it. But another part of him felt sad that it came to this. Not sad for them exactly, but sad that racism was so deeply embedded that 3 people could ruin dozens of lives and think they were doing the right thing. I need some air, Marcus said. This has been a lot. He left the conference room and took the elevator down to the lobby. He walked outside into the cool morning air. People rushed past him on the sidewalk, heading to their jobs, living their lives. They had no idea what had just happened inside that building. Marcus's phone rang. It was his mother. How did it go? She asked. We fired them, Marcus said. It's done. How do you feel? Marcus thought about that question. Relieved, angry, sad, hopeful, all at once. That sounds about right, his mother said gently. What you did matters, Marcus. You gave people a voice who didn't have one. You created accountability where there was none. Be proud of that. I am, Marcus said. But Mom, this is just one company. How many other companies have recruiters just like Jessica and Brad? How many qualified people are being rejected everywhere because of this? Too many, his mother admitted. But you can't fix everything. You can only fix what's in front of you. You did that today. Now you build something better, and maybe, hopefully, other companies will see your example and do the same. Marcus hoped she was right. He stayed outside for a few more minutes, letting the fresh air clear his head. Then he went back inside. He had work to do, a new system to build, changes to make, people to help. When he got back to the executive floor, his father was waiting. There's someone here who wants to meet you, David said. He led Marcus to a smaller conference room. Inside was a woman in her 30s, professionally dressed, looking nervous. She stood up when Marcus and David entered. Marcus, David said, this is Kendra Washington. She had an interview yesterday with Jessica's team. Marcus remembered, the black woman they had planned to reject. Ms. Washington, he said, shaking her hand. Thank you for coming. Please call me Kendra, she said. Patricia called me this morning and asked me to come in. She said there were issues with my interview process yesterday. I have to admit I'm confused about what's happening. David and Marcus exchanged glances. Then David said, Kendra, please sit down. We have some things to explain to you. They told her everything. About the investigation, the discrimination, the recording, and the firings. Kendra listened with growing shock and anger on her face. When they finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I knew something was off about that interview. The questions were strange, the way they looked at me, but I convinced myself I was being paranoid, that I was seeing racism where there wasn't any. You weren't paranoid, Marcus said gently. You were right. Your instincts were correct. How many other people felt like I did? Kendra asked. How many times did I interview somewhere and get rejected, and I told myself I just wasn't good enough when maybe it was this? It was a painful question without a good answer. We can't answer that question, Marcus said honestly. But we can tell you this. You are absolutely qualified for positions at this company. Your rejection yesterday had nothing to do with your abilities. We'd like to offer you a real interview with a fair panel, if you're still interested. Kendra looked between Marcus and David. I'm interested, she said firmly. And thank you. Thank you for doing something about this. Most companies just sweep it under the rug. Not this one, David said. Not anymore. Over the next 2 weeks, Global Tech Solutions went through major changes. Patricia assembled a new recruitment team with diverse members from different backgrounds. They developed structured interview processes where every candidate was asked the same questions in the same way. They created scoring systems based on actual job requirements, not vague feelings about culture fit. Marcus worked with Patricia to design training programs, but not the usual diversity training that people sat through and forgot. Instead, they created programs that challenged people to examine their own biases. They brought in real candidates who had faced discrimination to share their stories. They made it personal and real. The company also reached out to the 87 qualified black candidates who had been rejected over the past 3 years. David personally signed letters of apology. Each letter acknowledged what had happened and offered a chance to reapply with guaranteed fair consideration. Responses varied. Some people were angry and wanted nothing to do with the company. Marcus understood that. Some people were grateful for the apology, but had moved on to other opportunities. But 32 people agreed to come back for new interviews. Jamal Harris was one of them. Marcus met him personally on his interview day. Jamal was 29 years old with an easy smile but cautious eyes. He had been working at a smaller tech company since his rejection from Global Tech 18 months earlier. I have to be honest, Jamal said as they sat in Marcus's office. I'm not sure why I'm here. I got your letter, I appreciate the apology, but I'm doing fine where I am. Why should I give this company another chance? Marcus appreciated the directness. You shouldn't unless we prove we've changed. I can't erase what happened to you, but I can show you what we're doing differently now. We fired the people responsible. We rebuilt the entire hiring process. We're holding ourselves accountable, but words are cheap. You deserve to see action. Why did you go undercover? Jamal asked. I mean, you're the son of the CEO. You could have just told them to stop discriminating. Because discrimination often hides behind plausible excuses, Marcus explained. If I had just confronted them based on complaints, they would have denied everything. Said the candidates weren't qualified. Said it was about culture fit, not race. I needed undeniable proof, and I needed to understand what black candidates actually experience. Jamal nodded slowly. That took guts. Most people in your position wouldn't have bothered. Most people in my position don't have a black mother who taught them to care, Marcus said. I have privilege. I should use it to help, not just benefit myself. Jamal went through the new interview process. 3 different interviewers, all asking structured questions about his technical skills, problem-solving abilities, and past experience. No questions about where he was really from or how he got into MIT. Just professional questions about the job. He was hired a week later. So was Kendra Washington, and 9 other previously rejected candidates. Each one brought excellent skills and fresh perspectives to the company. But the changes went beyond just hiring. Marcus used his new role as vice president of company culture to address other issues too. He discovered that black employees at all levels reported feeling excluded from informal networking. So he created mentorship programs and employee resource groups. He pushed for transparent promotion criteria so people couldn't be passed over for vague reasons. Not everyone was happy about the changes. Some longtime employees complained about reverse discrimination or political correctness. A few even quit. Marcus tried to address their concerns, but he also stood firm. The company was committed to fairness, and that meant real change, not just surface-level gestures. 3 months after the firings, Marcus received a letter. It was from Amy Winters, one of the 3 recruiters. She wrote about how losing her job had been devastating, how she had spent weeks angry and in denial. But then she started therapy and began confronting her own biases. She realized how many harmful beliefs she had absorbed without questioning them. She was working to change, though she knew it would take a long time. She ended the letter with an apology. Not just a simple sorry, but a detailed acknowledgement of specific harm she had caused. She listed candidates by name, including Marcus. She took full responsibility for her actions. She did not ask for forgiveness or a second chance. She just wanted him to know she understood now. Marcus showed the letter to his mother. What do you think? He asked. His mother read it carefully. I think people can change, she said. Not everyone does, but some people genuinely learn from their mistakes. Whether you choose to forgive her is up to you, but recognition and growth matter. Marcus wrote back to Amy. He thanked her for the letter and acknowledged the growth it showed. He did not offer her a job or tell her all was forgiven, but he told her that real change was possible if she stayed committed to it. It was the honest response he could give. Jessica and Brad, on the other hand, showed no signs of learning anything. Through the industry network, Marcus heard that Jessica was filing complaints with various agencies claiming she had been fired unfairly. Brad was reportedly bitter and angry, telling anyone who would listen that he had been set up. Neither had found new jobs in the field. Their reputations had been damaged, just as they had damaged so many others. 6 months after the changes began, Global Tech Solutions released its first diversity report. The numbers showed real improvement. Black candidates were now being hired at rates comparable to other groups. Employee satisfaction surveys showed that black employees felt more respected and included. Several other tech companies reached out to learn about their new processes. Marcus was invited to speak at a conference about corporate diversity. He stood on stage in front of hundreds of business leaders and told his story. He talked about going undercover, about what he heard in that break room, and about the changes that followed. The problem is not just individual bad people, he told the audience. The problem is systems that allow discrimination to thrive. Jessica, Brad, and Amy were individuals, yes, but they operated in a system that gave them power without accountability. They could reject candidates for vague reasons and no one questioned it. That's what we changed. We built accountability into the system. After his speech, dozens of people approached him. Some shared their own experiences with discrimination. Others asked for advice on changing their companies. A few admitted they probably had similar problems but did not know how to address them. One young black woman thanked him with tears in her eyes. "I've been rejected from so many jobs," she said. "I always wondered if it was me. If I wasn't good enough. Hearing your story helps me understand it might not be about me at all." That conversation stayed with Marcus for a long time. The damage that discrimination causes goes beyond just lost opportunities. It makes people question their own worth. It makes them doubt their abilities. That psychological harm might be even worse than the economic harm. A year after the changes began, Marcus stood in his father's office again. The view was the same, tall buildings stretching across the city. But everything else felt different. "I've been thinking," David said, "about expanding what we started here. What if we created a foundation? Something dedicated to fighting workplace discrimination. We could help other companies build better systems. We could support people who face discrimination and don't have the resources to fight back." Marcus felt excitement building. Like a legal support fund for people facing discrimination? Exactly. And consulting services to help companies audit their practices. And research into what actually works to reduce bias. We could make a real difference beyond just our own company. "I love it," Marcus said. "When do we start?" "We already have," David said with a smile. He handed Marcus a document. It was the charter for the Chen Foundation for Workplace Equality. David had already committed $5 million to get it started. Marcus read through the document with growing enthusiasm. They would help individuals facing discrimination. They would work with companies that wanted to change. They would fund research into effective interventions. They would tell stories to raise awareness. "This is amazing, Dad," Marcus said. "But I have one request. I want Jamal Harris to help run it, and Kendra Washington. People who have actually experienced discrimination should be leading this work, not just people like me who witnessed it." David nodded. "Good idea. Talk to them and see if they're interested." Both Jamal and Kendra were very interested. Within 3 months, the Chen Foundation for Workplace Equality had an office, a staff of 8 people, and its first batch of cases. They helped a woman who had been passed over for promotions repeatedly. They worked with a small company that wanted to audit its hiring practices. They connected job seekers with companies committed to fair hiring. The foundation also published the data from Global Tech Solutions' case. With names removed for privacy, they showed the hiring patterns before and after the changes. They shared the specific interventions that worked. They made it a case study that other companies could learn from. The story spread through the business world. Some praised it as an example of real accountability. Others criticized it as an overreaction. But everyone was talking about it. And conversation was the first step toward change. 2 years after that difficult interview, Marcus was back in the Global Tech Solutions lobby. But this time he was meeting a group of college students touring the company. 20 students from various backgrounds, all interested in tech careers. One young man, a black student from Howard University, approached Marcus after the tour. "I heard about what happened here," he said. "About you going undercover. That's actually why I applied for an internship. I wanted to work somewhere that takes these issues seriously." "Did you get the internship?" Marcus asked. "I did," the young man said with a proud smile. "Interview last week. They asked great questions about my projects and goals. Nobody asked where I was really from or how I got into college. It felt respectful." Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction. That's exactly what we wanted to create. "I'm glad it worked for you." As the students left, Marcus thought about everything that had changed. 3 people had lost their jobs, deservedly so. Dozens of people had gotten new opportunities they deserved. An entire company had transformed its culture. A foundation was helping people across the country, but the work was not done. Marcus knew that. Racism did not end because one company fired 3 recruiters. Discrimination still happened every day in countless workplaces. People still faced barriers because of their skin color, their gender, their accents, their names. Yet change was possible. That was the lesson Marcus had learned. Real, meaningful change was possible when people had courage, when they demanded accountability, and when they built better systems. It was not easy. It was not quick. But it was possible. Marcus returned to his office and looked at a framed photo on his wall. It showed the diverse team at Global Tech Solutions celebrating their 1-year anniversary of the new hiring practices. People of different races, genders, ages, and backgrounds, all hired based on their actual qualifications, all treated with respect, all thriving. That photo represented what was possible, not perfection but progress, not the end of discrimination, but accountability when it happened, not just diversity for show, but real inclusion that valued everyone's contributions. His phone buzzed with a message from Kendra. She had just interviewed a candidate who reminded her of herself 2 years ago. Young black woman, excellent credentials, nervous but qualified, Kendra wrote. I made sure she felt welcomed and respected. She's going to get the job. We're doing this right. Marcus smiled and wrote back. That's what it's all about. He thought about Jessica, Brad, and Amy sometimes. He wondered if Jessica still believed she had done nothing wrong. He wondered if Brad had learned anything from the experience. He hoped Amy was continuing her journey of growth and self-examination, but mostly he thought about the future, about the students who would interview at companies and be judged fairly, about the employees who would work in inclusive environments, about the leaders who would build better systems because they saw what was possible. Change started with one person being brave enough to expose the truth, but it continued with many people working together to build something better. Marcus had started the process, but hundreds of people at Global Tech Solutions and beyond were now carrying it forward. That evening, Marcus had dinner with his parents. His mother asked how his day was. Instead of giving a simple answer, he told them about the student from Howard University, about Kendra's message, about the ongoing work of the foundation. You've done something important, his father said. You took a painful experience and turned it into positive change. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of both of you, his mother added. It takes courage to face racism head-on, and it takes wisdom to respond with justice instead of just anger. Marcus thought about that. Justice, not just anger. Accountability, not just revenge. Change, not just punishment. Those were the principles that had guided him through this experience. As he drove home that night, Marcus passed the Global Tech Solutions building. Lights glowed in windows throughout the tower. Inside, people were working late on projects. People who had been hired fairly. People who were valued for their contributions. People who could come to work without worrying about discrimination. It was not perfect. Problems still arose. But now there were systems in place to address them. Now there was accountability. Now there was leadership committed to doing the right thing. Marcus thought about the young man who would interview at his company next week. About the woman who would apply next month. About all the future candidates who would walk through those doors and be treated with respect and fairness. They would never know about Jessica, Brad, and Amy. They would never hear that recording or see those discriminatory hiring statistics, but they would benefit from the changes that followed. They would have opportunities that might have been denied to them before. That was the real victory, not the firings or the confrontations, but the countless fair interviews that would happen in the future, the careers that would flourish, the potential that would not be wasted. Marcus Chen had gone undercover as Marcus Johnson to expose racism, but in doing so, he had helped create a future where everyone could be judged by their actual abilities, where the color of someone's skin did not determine their opportunities, where justice and fairness were not just ideals but actual practices. It was just one company in one city. But it was a start, and every journey toward justice had to start somewhere. This was theirs, and it was making a difference.